The silence in the apartment did not happen overnight, crept in slowly like a cold draft under a closed door. At first, Alina thought she was imagining it. Mark was just busy, she told herself. Work had been demanding lately. Deadlines, meetings, new clients, that was normal. Marriage had seasons. Not every week could feel like the beginning. But as days turned into weeks, the quiet between them stopped feeling peaceful and started feeling heavy. That evening, Elena stood by the kitchen counter, staring at the clock on the wall. It was past 10. The food she had cooked hours ago sat, untouched on the stove. She had reheated it twice already. Her phone lay face down beside her. She had typed 3 messages to Mark and deleted all of them. She did not want to sound needy. She did not want to sound suspicious. She just wanted to understand. When the front door finally opened, she straightened her back. Mark stepped inside, loosening his tie. He looked tired, but not in the usual way. His eyes moved around the room before landing on her. He smiled quickly. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she replied. He placed his keys on the table, walked to the kitchen, and kissed her forehead. It was a light, careful kiss. Polite. The kind a friend might give. Lena felt it more in her thoughts than on her skin. "Long day?" she asked. "Yeah, meetings all day." She nodded. She wanted to ask more. She wanted to ask why his shirt smelled faintly of a different perfume, one she did not own. But she swallowed the question. She hated how quickly doubt could turn into accusation. They ate dinner across from each other. The sound of forks against plates filled the space where laughter used to live. Mark checked his phone twice. Each time, he tilted the screen away without thinking. Alina noticed. She noticed. Everything now, after dinner, he went straight to the shower. Alina stayed at the table, staring at the empty chair across from her. She remembered a night from years ago when they had sat there talking about their future. Mark had reached across the table and taken her hand, telling her he could not wait to grow old with her. His eyes had been bright then, full of promise. She tried to remember the last time he had looked at her like that. When he came back from the shower, he was already half distracted. He said he had emails to answer. He sat on the couch with his laptop open, typing quickly. The blue light reflected on his face. Alina watched him from the hallway. He seemed far away, even though he was only a few steps from her. She went to bed alone that night. She lay on her side, facing his empty pillow. When he finally came to bed, he turned his back to her. He used to sleep with one arm wrapped around her waist. Now there was space between them, like an invisible wall. Alina closed her eyes, but sleep did not come. Her thoughts ran fast. Was he bored? Was she no longer enough? Had love simply faded the way people warned it might? The next morning, she woke early and made breakfast. She wanted to start fresh. Scrambled eggs, toasted bread, poured orange juice. When Mark walked into the kitchen, he looked surprised. "You're up early." "I thought we could have breakfast together." He glanced at his watch. "I actually have to leave in 10 minutes. Her heart dropped, but she forced a smile. "Of course." He grabbed a piece of toast, kissed her cheek quickly, and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Alina stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at the 2 plates she had set. One remained untouched. At work. She tried to focus. She answered emails, attended meetings, smiled at coworkers. But her mind kept replaying small details. The way Mark avoided eye contact. The way he kept his phone close. The way he no longer asked about her day. That evening, she decided to try something different. She stopped by a small store on her way home and bought candles and fresh flowers. She cooked his favorite pasta. She wore the blue dress he once said made her look like the sky at sunset. When Mark came home, he paused at the doorway. "What's all this?" "I just thought we could have a nice dinner," she said lightly. He looked around, then at her. For a second, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even guilt. But it disappeared quickly. "That's sweet," he said. They sat down. She tried to keep the conversation easy. She asked about his meetings. He answered in short sentences. She told him about a funny moment at her office. He smiled politely but did not ask for details. Halfway through dinner, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and stood up immediately. "Need to take this." He walked into the other room. Alina heard his low voice, but not the words. Her hands tightened around her fork. Her mind filled in the blanks with stories she did not want to believe. When he returned, he said it was a work call. Urgent. He apologized and said he had to leave again to handle something. She watched him grab his jacket. "Mark," I said. Before she could stop herself, he paused. "Is everything okay?" He hesitated just for a second. Yes. Why wouldn't it be? She searched his face. She wanted honesty. She wanted reassurance. Instead, she saw a wall. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "You just feel far." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm just stressed, Alina. Please don't make this into something bigger." The words stung. She was not trying to create drama. She was trying to save what felt like it was slipping away. "I'm not making it bigger," she said quietly. "I just miss you." For a moment, silence filled the room again. Mark stepped closer and touched her shoulders. "I'm right here." But he wasn't, not really. He left soon after. The candles burned low on the table. Alina sat alone, staring at the soft light. Tears slid down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. Days passed like that. Late nights. Short answers. Distant eyes. One afternoon, Alina opened their closet to put away laundry. She hung one of Mark's shirts. She noticed it smelled different again. Not strong. Just unfamiliar. Her chest tightened. She pressed the fabric to her face, hating herself for even checking. She did not want to become the kind of wife who searched for clues. She trusted him. She had always trusted him. But trust without communication began to feel fragile. That night, she finally gathered the courage to ask directly. They were sitting on the couch. The television was on, but neither of them was watching. "Mark," she began carefully, "is there something you're not telling me?" He looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, have I done something? Are you unhappy?" Expression changed from surprise to frustration. "Why would you think that?" "Because you don't talk to me anymore. You're always somewhere else." He stood up, pacing slightly. "I'm working hard for us." "That's what I'm doing." "I know," she said quickly. "And I appreciate that, but I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to let me in." He stopped pacing. For a moment, she thought he might open up. Instead, he shook his head. "You're overthinking," he said. "Everything is fine." Fine. The word felt empty. After that conversation, Alina stopped asking. Not because she was satisfied, but because she was tired. Tired of feeling like she was begging for connection. Tired of pretending she did not notice the change. One evening, as she sat alone in the living room, her phone buzzed. It was a social media memory from 4 years ago. A photo of her and Mark at the beach. They were laughing, sunburned, and happy. His arm was wrapped tightly around her. The caption read, "Forever starts now." Alina stared at the image for a long time. She tried to see the same man in the person who now walked past her without really seeing her. She wondered when forever had started to feel uncertain. That was when a thought entered her mind. Quiet at first, then stronger. Adrian. Mark's uncle had always been close to him, more like a mentor than family. Mark respected his advice, trusted his opinion. If something was wrong, maybe Adrian would know. Or maybe he could help Mark speak. Honestly, Alina hesitated. It felt strange to involve someone else. Marriage was supposed to be private. But what if privacy was slowly destroying them? She picked up her phone and scrolled to Adrian's number. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Her heart beat fast. What if she was wrong about everything? What if she embarrassed herself? What if Mark felt betrayed by her reaching out? But what if doing nothing meant losing him completely? The silence in the apartment felt louder than ever. It pressed against her ears. against her chest. She took a deep breath and pressed call. As the phone rang, she felt both fear and hope rise together inside her. She did not know that this single decision would change everything, and she was not prepared for how deeply it would test her heart. Elena's hand trembled as she hung up the phone. She had finally called Adrian, and he had agreed to meet her the very next afternoon. Driving to his house, she felt a strange mixture of nervousness and relief. Nervousness because she was crossing a line she had never thought she would cross, relief because at last she was taking action. For weeks, she had been alone with her thoughts, replaying every glance, every sigh, every moment that made her heart ache with doubt. The house felt emptier every day, and the distance between her and Mark was growing like a silent storm. Talking to Adrian felt like stepping into a safe harbor, even if she wasn't entirely sure why. Adrian's house was warm and quiet. He opened the door before she could knock. There was a calm strength about him, a presence that made Elena feel both seen and safe, as if she could confess anything without judgment. "Elena," he said gently, his voice low and steady. "It's good to see you. Come in." She stepped inside, suddenly aware of how tense she felt. The walls were lined with books, soft furniture, and framed family photos. Everything about the room felt inviting. Adrian gestured to a comfortable armchair near the window. Sunlight spilled across the floor, catching dust motes in a golden glow. She sat, wringing her hands, unsure how to begin. I don't know where to start," she admitted, her voice shaking. She tried to breathe steadily, reminding herself that she had done the right thing. She was not being sneaky. She was not being petty. She just wanted to understand her husband. She wanted to save her marriage. Adrian nodded, leaning back in his chair, his hands folded over his lap. "Start wherever you feel you must," he said softly. His call made it easier for her to speak. She took a deep breath and began to explain. She told him about the late nights, the half-hearted smiles, the distance that had slowly crept into their relationship. She described the moments when she reached for him and he seemed to pull away, the dinners where conversation felt forced, and the feeling of emptiness that had become a constant companion. She even told him about the small, almost unnoticeable things, the faint perfume on his clothes, the way he avoided eye contact, the way his mind seemed somewhere else even when he was in the same room. Each word felt like lifting a weight off her chest, yet it also left her vulnerable. She was admitting fears she had barely allowed herself to think. Fears that threatened to undo her carefully constructed sense of normalcy. Adrian listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to reassure her. He just let her speak. And that simple act of listening made Elena feel an unexpected sense of relief. She realized that for weeks, maybe even months, she hadn't really been heard. She had spoken, yes, but she had spoken to walls, to silence, to a husband who seemed trapped in his own struggles. And now, finally, someone was listening without judgment. Someone was taking her feelings seriously. She realized that the tears she hadn't let herself shed at home now streamed freely. Her shoulders shook, and Adrian handed her a tissue without a word. She wiped her eyes and took another deep breath when she finished. Silence stretched between them, but it was a comfortable silence, not the oppressive kind she had been living with. Adrian's eyes held a mixture of concern and understanding. "I see," he said finally. "I see why you're hurting." Elena's heart thumped. She was relieved he understood, but a part of her also felt an odd confusion. Adrian's presence was soothing, almost magnetic, and for a fleeting moment she wondered what it would feel like to be held and reassured by him. Not Mark. She shook her head, chastising herself silently. She was here for her husband, not to explore feelings for his uncle. Still, she couldn't deny the warmth that had sparked inside her chest. A warmth she hadn't felt for months. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his hands still folded. "Elena, marriages go through seasons. Sometimes people pull away not because of love lost, but because of fear or pressure they cannot express. Alina nodded. That's what I feel, she admitted. It's like he's here, but he isn't. Like he's closing me out without meaning to. Adrian's gaze softened. Exactly. Men often believe they must carry burdens alone. They think sharing them makes them weak, or that admitting struggle will make the people they love see them differently. Your husband. He might be struggling with something he hasn't told you yet. Elena's chest tightened. She had been so ready to fear the worst, to imagine betrayal or resentment. And now she was forced to consider another possibility. That Mark's distance was not about her, but about his own fear and pride. I've tried everything, she said quietly. I've tried to reconnect. I've tried dinners, trips, notes, surprises. Nothing seems to reach him. Adrian nodded knowingly. Sometimes the gestures are not enough when the heart is carrying something heavy it cannot share. Sometimes even love cannot reach someone who believes he must face his fears alone. Elena's eyes filled with tears again. She had never thought of it that way. She had assumed the worst because it was easier than considering he might be hurting silently. The idea that he had been struggling, carrying a burden without letting her in, hit her like a revelation. Her anger, her doubt, her jealousy, they all began to feel misplaced, replaced by a deep, aching empathy. Adrian paused for a moment, studying her expression. I can help, he said gently. Not to confront him harshly, not to embarrass him, but to remind him that he doesn't have to face anything alone. He loves you, Alina. That much I know. Sometimes love is quiet, even when it is strong. Elena's heart thumped again. She had come seeking clarity about her husband, not expecting validation from Adrian. But hearing him say that Mark loved her even if he was lost in his own struggles gave her hope she had not felt in months. She felt a small spark inside. The first sign of light in what had been a long, dark tunnel. As they continued to talk, Alina found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in weeks. Adrian didn't rush the conversation. Didn't he offer cliches or easy solutions? Instead, he shared stories from his own life. Moments of doubt, moments of fear, and how he had learned that openness was often the only path to connection. She listened, fascinated by the quiet wisdom in his words. There was something comforting about the way he spoke, a calm reassurance that made her feel safe enough to imagine possibilities she had closed off long ago. She realized, almost with surprise, that she had missed talking with someone who truly listened. Mark hadn't been able to give her that space recently, but Adrian did. For a brief, confusing moment, Alina felt a flutter in her chest, a stirring of emotions she hadn't anticipated. Adrian's presence was strong, steady, and entirely non-threatening. Yet it awakened feelings of warmth and attention she had been starved for. She quickly reminded herself why she was there. This wasn't about attraction. It was about connection. It was about saving her marriage. She owed Mark honesty, patience, and understanding. Still, she could not deny the subtle way her heart responded to Adrian's calm, attentive presence. It made her feel alive again, in a way she had not realized she had been missing. Adrian noticed the slight tension in her expression and smiled gently. Alina, he said, you don't have to carry this burden alone either. Even if you are strong, even if you are patient, it is okay to seek guidance. You are doing the right thing by reaching out. His words washed over her like a balm. She had been carrying guilt alongside worry, feeling selfish for doubting Mark, feeling ashamed for imagining the worst. She understood that seeking help was not betrayal. It was courage. It was love in action. They spoke for hours that afternoon, tracing the lines of her worries, her fears, and her hope. Alina told him about her longing for the intimacy that had disappeared, the small touches and shared smiles that used to define her marriage. Adrian encouraged her to see the distinction between absence caused by fear and absence caused by neglect. He reminded her that love could exist quietly, even when it was not always visible. Alina listened, absorbing every word, feeling the weight on her shoulders ease. bit by bit. Finally, Adrian reached a gentle conclusion. "I will speak to Mark," he said, "but not to accuse him, not to force anything. I will speak as someone who loves him, who respects him, and who wants him to know that you are still here, waiting, patient, and loyal. That he does not have to face fear alone." Alina nodded, gratitude filling her chest. She realized she could finally breathe. She had a plan, she had hope, and she knew that Mark might finally open up. That the walls he had built around himself might begin to crumble, brick by brick. Driving home, her mind swirled with a complex mix of anticipation and nervousness. She wondered how Mark would react. She hoped he would see the love behind her actions, the desperation not to lose him. But a quiet part of her also recognized the subtle confusion Adrian's presence had sparked within her. A gentle stir of emotions that were not meant for Mark, but reminded her how it felt to be seen, truly seen, without judgment. She chastised herself softly. These feelings were not her focus. Her focus was Mark, her marriage, her family. And yet she could not erase the lingering warmth that had touched her heart that afternoon. The evening air felt unusually still as Mark walked through the front door. Alina was already in the living room, the soft light of the candles flickering against the walls, their warmth spilling across the floor. She had been waiting, heart racing, unsure if tonight would be the night she would finally hear the truth. She had rehearsed her words countless times in her mind, yet when he appeared, all she could do was stand, frozen for a moment, trying to read his expression. There was tension in his shoulders, a weariness in his eyes, but also something else, something she hadn't seen for weeks. Vulnerability. "Hey," he said softly, his voice quieter than usual, almost hesitant. Lena nodded, swallowing hard. "Hey," she replied, trying to keep her tone steady, though her hands were clammy. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two people trapped between silence and confession. Neither spoke first, as if the pause itself held meaning, waiting for one of them to break it. Finally, Mark exhaled deeply and took a small step forward. "Did you talk to my uncle?" he asked, his voice low, almost fragile. "Yes," Alina admitted, her own voice barely above a whisper. She felt the weight of honesty press against her chest. She had been terrified that speaking to Adrian might make Mark angry, but he didn't react with anger. There was just a pause, a breath, a moment that stretched longer than any she had experienced in recent weeks. I needed help," she continued softly. "I didn't know what else to do." Mark sank into the armchair across from her, running a hand over his face as if trying to hide something he could not quite control. Alina watched him carefully, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders slumped slightly. She realized in that moment that the man she had loved and married was still there, just burdened, frightened, and trapped by his own pride. I didn't mean to push you away," he said finally, his voice breaking slightly. I thought I could handle it alone. I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want you to see me fail." Elena's chest tightened, but not from anger. It was empathy, the kind that makes your heart ache and swell at the same time. All the distance, all the nights of doubt, all the silent dinners suddenly had a new meaning. Mark had been struggling, yes, but not against her. He had been struggling against himself, against the pressure he placed on himself, against the fear of disappointing the one person he loved most. She reached out slowly, placing a hand over his. He looked at her, startled, then held it. For the first time in weeks, their hands were together, not out of habit or routine, but as a bridge across the space that had formed between them. I thought I was failing," Mark continued, his voice shaking. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I worked harder, I could fix it alone. But instead, I just kept pushing you away. I didn't mean to hurt you." Alina felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had imagined betrayal, imagined the worst. But now she saw the truth, pain, fear, and love tangled together in a way that made her heart ache. She squeezed his hand gently. "You're not failing," she whispered. "You don't have to face everything alone. I'm here. I've always been here." For the next hour, they spoke in ways they hadn't for months. Not just about the financial pressures that had weighed Mark down, but about their fears, their frustrations, and the longing they both felt for the closeness that had slipped away. They talked about the small things, how she had felt invisible. At times, how he had felt incapable of meeting expectations, how both of them had retreated in fear rather than reaching out. With each sentence, each confession, the walls between them began to crumble. Not instantly, but steadily, piece by piece. Mark admitted details he had never shared before: the failed investments, the moments at work where he had felt small and powerless, the shame he carried silently. Kana listened, her heart breaking and expanding at the same time. She understood now that the distance had never been about a lack of love or attraction to someone else. It had been about fear and pride, and the weight of responsibility. The realization brought both relief and sorrow. Relief that he had not betrayed her. Sorrow for all the nights they had spent apart emotionally, each assuming the other was distant or uncaring. "I should have told you," Mark said, his voice tight with regret. "I should have trusted you. With it, I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid you'd think less of me." Alina shook her head gently. "I don't need you to be perfect," she said softly. "I need you to be honest. That's all. Honesty and love. Everything else we can face together." He looked at her, eyes glistening. The vulnerability he showed made him human, real and profoundly lovable. She realized how much she had missed, not just his presence, but his openness, his willingness to be seen without pretense. They spoke long into the night. The conversation shifted from confessions to plans to rebuild trust, to communicate more openly, to share the burdens of life rather than hide them. They made small promises, to have weekly talks about their feelings, to check in with each other when work or stress became overwhelming, to remember the little gestures that once made them feel close. It wasn't grand or dramatic, it was honest. And in that honesty, they both felt a spark of hope they hadn't felt in months. Alina noticed the subtle changes in Mark immediately after that conversation. He began asking questions about her day, really listening, responding with care instead of automatic politeness. He smiled in ways that reached his eyes. He held her hand more often, lingered in small touches, and let his presence speak the love that had been buried under fear. They still had challenges, financial concerns, emotional baggage, habits formed in months of distance, but the foundation had shifted. They were a team again, not because everything was perfect, but because they were willing to face imperfection together. For Alina, the experience also brought clarity about her own emotions. During the conversation with Adrian, she had felt a subtle stir in her chest, a reminder of the warmth of being truly seen. It had startled her at first, a flicker of emotion she hadn't anticipated. But now, reflecting on that feeling, she realized it had been a reminder not of attraction, but of the deep human need to be acknowledged, understood, and valued. She loved Mark, and that love had been tested, strained, and stretched, but it was still alive. And it was stronger for having been challenged and addressed honestly. The following days were marked by small, yet meaningful shifts. Mark stopped staying late unnecessarily and began including her in conversations about work and life pressures. Alina shared her fears openly, no longer bottling them inside. They cooked together, went for walks, laughed again at jokes that had seemed trivial. Before each moment of connection rebuilt what had been lost, one conversation, one touch, one shared glance at a time. They learned to be vulnerable without fear, to communicate without judgment, and to recognize that love is not always dramatic. It is often quiet, patient, and steadfast. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the sun set, Mark reached for her hand. The sky was painted in oranges and pinks. the kind of colors that make the heart pause. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Thank you for not giving up on us. For reaching out, for understanding, for waiting." Lena squeezed his hand, her own voice thick with emotion. "I didn't give up because I love you," she replied. "I stayed because I knew that even in silence, we could find our way back." The sunset seemed to reflect this shift in their lives. The warmth, the color, the calm after a day of tension, it was symbolic of the emotional journey they had just navigated. Alina realized that what had once left her feeling lost and isolated now left her with gratitude, hope, and renewed affection. The moments of fear, doubt, and distance had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, more connected, and more aware of what it truly meant to be partners in life. In the weeks that followed, their routine carried the subtle marks of renewed intimacy. Morning coffees became moments of shared conversation rather than rushed silence. Evenings were no longer filled with separate distractions, but with quiet companionship, laughter, and the gentle reassurance of presence. They still faced problems, as all couples do, but the fear that once overshadowed their love had been replaced with understanding and patience. Alina noticed that the small, thoughtful gestures, touching her hand, asking her opinion, sharing a laugh, held more meaning than ever before. Each gesture became a thread in the tapestry. They were rebuilding together. Alina often reflected on the pivotal moment that had changed everything. Reaching out to Adrian, she understood that seeking help had not undermined her marriage. It had preserved it. Adrian had not solved their problems for them. He had simply guided them to honesty, encouraged openness, and reminded Mark that he was not alone. That gentle intervention had sparked the chain of events that allowed them to reconnect. Alina realized that love sometimes needs support, not as a crutch, but as a mirror, reflecting truth and reminding both partners of their shared bond.